relationships are impermanent. Just like everything else in this world, in this life, relationships are impermanent. The truth of impermanence is a supreme treasure that the Buddha made the centerpiece of his Dhamma. Of course, we all recognize in an everyday sense that the plates in our cupboard will one day get broken, that the projects that we get involved in are of limited duration, and so on. But much of the time we actually act as though it's not so. And this hankering for permanence, for unchangeableness, can be the cause of a great deal of our trouble, a great deal of our distress in life, and constitutes in many ways the chains that prevent us enjoying complete spiritual liberation. Relationships are impermanent in the way that we are impermanent. Relationships are impermanent because we are impermanent. We're not just impermanent in the sense that we're not immortals, in the sense that we don't live forever, that we do die, which is certainly a very palpable form of impermanence, but everything about us, our ideas, our interests, our emotions, our way of life, it changes. I myself have changed hugely over my lifetime. I am by no means the person that I was when I was in my 20s. These changes have been profound, extensive, and radical. Now, this is a success. Yeah? The fact that I have changed so much in my life is something that I look back on and relish, and I celebrate, and I feel very good about. I feel, oh, that's wonderful that I have changed so much in my life. I have learned so much, I have absorbed so much, I have experienced so much. I've learned to do things that I could not do before. I've learned to see things in ways that I could not see before. I have opened my treasure chest up, as it were, in all sorts of ways. This is success. And because we change, relationships change. Relationships in my own life have changed. It's an interesting paradox that we tend to perceive changes in relationships as a failure, when what brings about changes in relationships we perceive as a success. And this kind of mismatch is a cause of great confusion and trouble and suffering. We conduct our relationships as if they should never change, as if they should continue exactly the same forever and ever. And at the same time, we are changing and celebrating changing and wanting to change and enjoying changing. So we are living a kind of flat contradiction, which is a real struggle and simply doesn't work. Two people, what is a relationship? A relationship, we're talking here about adult relationships between people that become friendships, that become intimate, that sometimes become marriages. What is happening here? It's like these occur when the spiritual trajectory of two lives intersects. We meet at a certain point on that trajectory. We continue together for a time. It could be for an hour. It could be for a day. It could be for a year. It could be for a lifetime. It could be for a few lifetimes. But eventually, these two people separate and go their ways. This is how it is. This is how it will be. And what they will take when they go their separate ways is what they have learned and experienced, the transformations that have occurred for each of them in that meeting, in that encounter, which the universe has brought about. So I have met this person, we are now in this relationship, it is a special time, can I appreciate it? Can I appreciate it for what it is? You see, this is the kind of the correct attitude. Whatever we are doing at the time, we might be single, we might be married, we might have a friendship, we might not have a friendship. Can we enjoy, can we experience to the full what is at the time when it is, and not live our lives longing for whichever of these phases we're not in? You see? Or, alternatively, living in a state of fear that the state we're in might change. Because it will change. Whatever state we are in, whatever of these options we happen to be occupying at the moment, it will change. And it will particularly change out of the dynamic of how we live this present state. And if we do not change, if we do not grow, if we do not progress, if we do not deepen our sense of appreciation for life, our vitality, our joy in this present state, then we will stagnate and things will stay relatively unchanging for relatively longer. That will be a failure. So this business of change in relationships is something that we perhaps have to think anew about. We have to reassess. We have to see that a life which contains diversity, which contains variety, is not necessarily a failure. And a life of endless stability is not necessarily a success. It may be that through the same relationship one receives great benefits, one gives great benefits for a great length of time. But even then it will be impermanent in the end. And this impermanence is, an appreciation of this impermanence, is an important part of what it takes to have that level of appreciation. Let's think for a minute about our relationship, not so much our adult relationships, as our relationship with our child. If you have a child, what better spiritual practice can there be than having a child, you know? Child teaches you great concentration. A small baby requires more intense concentration than any meditation practice that you're likely to take on. A child requires love, compassion, joy and equanimity. A child requires right action, right thought, right effort, right speech. Everything that you could possibly think is part of your Buddhist practice is there in the relationship with a child. And what is the relationship with such a child, particularly a small child, a baby, a toddler? What is that relationship like? What is one's state of regard for that small being, that mystery that has burst into life in the midst of one's time? Well, it's a situation of endless change. Every day the child manifests something new. They are curious about something that they showed no interest in before. They're able to do something that they weren't able to do yesterday. They show some new small nuance of behavior or look or a word they can say today that they couldn't say yesterday. And this is to us a delight. We find this thrilling that we see these changes in the child. Every day, something new. And each new thing reinforces our love. We pour in our goodwill into this little being, seeing its changes and delighting in them. This is in stark contrast to how we often are in our adult relationship, where we try to keep everything exactly the same. We try to see our partner or our spouse the same as they were 10 years ago. It's not like we're looking for some new change today, or some growth, or some flowering of this being that we share our life with. We've got them in a box. We've got them in aspic. They have died in our eyes. And it's vital for the health of our relationships, our adult relationships, that the other person not die in our eyes, that they remain as alive and vital in our eyes as our child does. And therefore, that we see this impermanence, we see this constant change, this growth. We're on the lookout for what may change, what may grow. And in this way, a relationship can keep the two people involved in it alive. It will not do this if each of the partners, or even either of the partners, is trying to keep the relationship as it has always been, or as it was, or in some other fixed constellation, perhaps of their own imagining, such that it has never actually been, but which it has been in their imagination. If we're trying to hold it static in this way, we will not appreciate the depth of it. We will not get from it what we need to get. Because intimacy, meeting a person, entering into an intimate relationship with another person, is a spiritual practice. The relationship itself is an initiation into a deep mystery. The other person embodies that deep mystery in some way, in some particular way, in some concrete way, in some way full of conditions in this conditional world. This being that we have met, that we are with, that we share time with, embodies unconditional love. They may not even realize it themselves. They certainly do not realize exactly how themselves. But they are a manifestation of love that has appeared in our life. And we can appreciate that. We can be grateful for that. And we can enter into that mystery. A bit like the shaman going on the shaman's journey. The shaman goes on a journey into the mysteries and comes back with some wisdom. Relationship is like that. We enter into the mystery of the other person. We never fathom that mystery completely. The other person always remains tantalizing, always remains something not quite fully known. Because they're not quite fully known even to themselves. We are always discovering ourselves as we go along. And this is our spiritual practice, to be constantly discovering in this way. And relationship can be a great stimulus, vitalizing force in this spiritual process, because it can keep us alive to that exploration. It can keep us alive to that process of discovery. Because if we appreciate the process in one another, that keeps it alive, and the other person remains alive to us in our eyes. All too often, as I say, in actual relationships as we actually find them, while they were alive and vital in each other's eyes, at some point in the past, in the early tender days of the dawning of their love for one another, they have died. Each has died in the eyes of the other, and it's become static. Let's go back to thinking about the child. The child does not die in the eyes of the parent. Of course, there are bad parents, but generally speaking, the child remains vital and alive and a source of endless delight to the parents. Later, of course, a good deal of frustration as well. Well, this is as the child expands their particular qualities, and we go through conflicts, but we come out of those conflicts. We go beyond those conflicts. There are many changes, and we find something new. And the child, when the child is 10, is not the child that it was when it was 3. And the child, when it is 17, is not the child that it was when it was 10. And the child, when they are 25, is not the child that they were at any of those previous times. And when they are 40, they are not the same as they were at those earlier times. And is this a disaster? No. It would be a disaster if they were. It would be a disaster if they failed to change. It would be a disaster if they failed to grow up. And this does occasionally happen, and then it is a cause of great distress. Why is it that in our relationships with our partners we cannot appreciate this process of growth? It's the same alacrity that we experience it with our children. Because we fear that if our partner were to grow up spiritually, they might do what the child does when they grow up, and that is leave. They might go their own way. But sooner or later, they are going to go their own way. It may be in 10 lifetimes' time. It may be tomorrow. We do not know. If we live in fear of the possibility that our partner may grow up and go their way, we will never be able to appreciate or have the delight in them that we can have, that we need to have, not just for them, but for ourselves, for our own life, for our own growing up, because we too are growing up. We are growing up spiritually. Growing up doesn't stop when you're 18 or 25. Growing up goes on for life after life. We are endlessly growing up spiritually. Buddhism is not about returning to the state of infancy. Buddhism is about growing up spiritually. And growing up spiritually involves coming to a deep appreciation of the love and grace that we receive, the unconditional dimension of our being. It includes coming to terms with the conditional nature of our being, the passing of time, the change, the impermanence, and all the good that that impermanence brings, that the cherry blossom trees bring blossom every year, and the wind comes and blows that blossom away. This is the stuff of Buddhist poetry, but it's also the stuff of Buddhist wisdom. We are all impermanent beings. Our relationships are impermanent. The things that we create in our life, our projects, these are impermanent. Our children are impermanent. Thank goodness. It means that we grow, we change, we flourish, we mature, we become more than we were, and we are able to offer the world more and more than we could offer it before. And this is the delight of life. This is the realization of the spiritual path, that all is always going beyond, always becoming Buddha, always awakening, always entering into liberation. And in our relationships, we can celebrate this happening in one another, and we can appreciate